Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sanctuary. My name is Ryan, and today I have the honor to share more about the 10 pillars of the sanctuary. And today we're going to be talking about pillar number 7, which is restoration and forgiveness. And the 10 pillars, they're not laws, they're principles by which we try to practice on a daily basis in order to draw closer to God and to follow His path and to restore our relationship to God, to ourselves, and to other human beings on earth. Basically, to follow the great commands to love God with all our heart, mind, body, and soul, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. The 10 pillars are something which help us do that. And so far, we have done videos on the first 6, which were surrender and faith, confession, responsibility, humility, and obedience. And today we're going to be talking about restoration and forgiveness. And the way it's written in our church charter is that pillar number 7 is restoration, forgiveness. We seek to become peacemakers by pursuing healing in ourselves and reconciliation with others through the grace of forgiveness. As we were forgiven, so too do we practice forgiving others and releasing resentment and shame. And it starts off by saying that we seek to become peacemakers because blessed are those who are peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. That's precisely what we wish to become and to enter into the kingdom of God as God's kids. And one of the ways that we do that is through the practice of peace. Now, it is a practice. There's nobody who is perfect at peace. There is nobody who is a perfectly peaceful human being. We have some people throughout history that have really shown us, Jesus Christ himself, quite a few others in cultures all over the world that have shown us the principles of peace and the practice of peace and how they lived, and they taught us a lot about peace. And peace and forgiveness is all about restoration, not only with ourselves, but with other human beings. And when we restore our relationship to others and our relationship to God, our relationship to ourselves also becomes healthy. Now, one of the first things that somebody such as myself needs to remember is that, none of us are the righteous one in a relationship. One of the first areas where we probably need to make the most peace would be certainly those of us in relationships with a husband, a wife, a boyfriend, a girlfriend. That would be probably one of the areas where we most often need to apologize, reconcile, and restore our relationships. But we also need to make peace with people like our parents, our brothers and sisters, our neighbors, our friends, and even our enemies. Now, sometimes our enemies won't allow us to make peace with them, but we can still find peace in ourselves concerning them by trying anything possible that would be effective in restoring the relationship. And one of the ways to do that, of course, is through, we've already gone through the first 6 pillars of the sanctuary, and confession and responsibility leads to the ability to try and restore our relationships even with those who are our enemies, if possible. Now, obviously, we don't do those kind of things in a way that would put ourselves in danger or them in danger or cause additional problems. So oftentimes it is most helpful in this area, in this particular pillar, in all of them really, it is very helpful to discuss these kind of personal matters with another person who we're close to. And it could be a wife, it could be a friend, could be a pastor, could be a doctor or a psychologist. But in trying to pursue the principles of the sanctuary, first and foremost is, we're not seeking to do any greater harm. What we're seeking to do is cause restoration or bring about restoration if possible. But, like I said, first and foremost, a lot of us, with whoever the primary person is in our life, whether it is a parent, whether it is an intimate relationship, or a boss, or whoever the primary people in our life, there are probably a great many areas where we need to make peace and restore respect and balance to a relationship. And for each and every single one of us, this is going to be something completely different in how we go about it and what the details about it are. So nobody can really tell you exactly what it is that you have to do or need to do or how you should go about it. These are things that you'll need to pray about yourself and ask God to guide you and teach you in how you can possibly restore your relationships with others through making peace. And peace is how we do that. Peace is how we create the desire for forgiveness in us, because oftentimes there's been people in our lives, especially those of us who've been in abusive relationships, which, those we just need to get away from if possible and stay out of, and hopefully never, have to encounter that type of thing again, or even those people again. So it's like I said, we're not trying to do any more damage to our lives, or put us in positions where we're could possibly be hurt even further. But in areas of our life where, we ourselves know that, I have not brought, like I'll use my marriage for instance. Maybe I believe I have not really brought everything, all the love that I can to bear in my marriage, and I need to restore that. I need to own up to it, to my part, and take responsibility for my part in these matters, and to make peace, and to bring the type of love that deep down inside I actually want to, but can't so much on my own without God's help. And how we do that is, like I said, it says we seek to become peacemakers. That is because, in me, being a peacemaker isn't an automatic function. My automatic function is to protect myself and to protect what's mine and protect, my family, and do that at all costs, right? Because that's a physical instinct. So in seeking peace, we are automatically putting ourselves into the realm of the spirit, which is a good thing. That's precisely where we want to go. We want to live by the ways of the spirit rather than by the ways of the flesh. And we seek peace because it's not a thing that we will ever master. It's not a thing that where we achieve some level and then we have peace. As I said, we've had many on earth throughout history who have shown us the principles of such, and even they themselves in their own diaries and whatnot have written a great deal about the anger and anguish and that they have felt towards others, and how difficult it was for them to continue their work to show peace to the world and whatnot because of that. But that kind of makes sense, because we don't have to make peace with those that we have peace with. We have to make peace with those that we don't have peace with. And oftentimes that, like I said, can be an enemy, and it's something that needs to be made. So in realizing that, one of the first things I need to realize is that I can't make peace on my own. This is a principle of the Spirit. And so however I understand God, which of course those of us in the sanctuary have, our faith and belief is in God the Father and Jesus Christ, who brought us all of these principles by which we're trying to live, and therefore we have established the sanctuary as disciples of Christ. We can call ourselves Christians. We don't have to call ourselves Christians, because like I have said in the past, a great many articles of Christianity today absolutely don't really make sense to Christ's message whatsoever. So the word Christian has become very sullied and distorted by a few here and there who have used it to their advantage rather than for what it was meant for. But in being a disciple of Christ, which is to be a student of Christ, I have chosen to follow a certain way of life, knowing that I chose it because I need to. I wanted to. Because everything that I had done hadn't worked, or always led to some kind of failure, or led to the end of relationships. No matter how hard I tried, whatever good motives I may have had, there was always some missing element that didn't allow the relationship between myself and another human being to work out exactly how we had all hoped that it would. And that had to do with the fact that I was running the show on my own. I was doing things myself. I was basically God of my own life. And when I got to a place where I realized that I needed God's help in order to achieve the things that were, even in my own heart, as limited as my own personal wisdom and desire and intellect is, there were good things in my heart that I just could not achieve, no matter how hard I tried. I had a lot of old ideas. I had a lot of bad ideas. I had a lot of trauma, past trauma that would get in the way, that would interfere. And, sometimes in a relationship with another human being, they will do something that pushes one of those buttons. And then instead of responding to the scenario that is unfolding in front of us, since that button in us got pushed, that wound got touched, and the pain of that wound comes back up, all of the pain gets thrown back at the other person, of whatever the trauma was, and it is like a mountain of pain compared to what they have said or done in that moment. And then, of course, that escalates into huge arguments where we're now pushing their buttons back in retaliation, and they're pushing our buttons even more. And the next thing you know, we're actually saying things to each other that are extremely damaging, that are lies, that don't even make any sense. And all this wrath is coming out. And in the end, we wonder what on earth happened. We didn't even have an intention to have an argument in the first place. So, that's why we have these 10 pillars that we practice, because some of those things beforehand, before we can even start to make restoration to our relationships, is we have to take responsibility for our own wounds. And we have to stop making other people pay for our own wounds. And so first of all, we have to admit to them, and that's the confession part. And we have to take responsibility. And that's the owning it part. And we have to practice humility and realize that nobody is beneath us. Nobody's greater than us either, but nobody's beneath us. Yes, there are people who have authority on earth to do things, such as judges and whatnot, and people we elect and all that other kind of thing. But that authority is for a particular job. The person themselves, the man or woman who holds such authority, is not a greater person than we are. And they are not an authority in our life to tell us what type of relationship we can have with God and what type of human being that we are. We are the ones that are responsible for the type of human being that we are. And when we find out that we can't be the type of person that we wish to be, or our behavior has always been so destructive and sometimes even fatal to other people, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, somewhere along the line we have to take accountability and decide within ourselves if we're ready to do something about it, that we've lost. We just keep failing. And so in going through our lives, we will see there's a great many people where we need to make peace, and we need to forgive them. We need to forgive them of their parts because, like I said, none of us in any relationship is the more righteous person. None of us is the more loved person by God. None of us is the more important person. None of us are the wiser person. We all have our talents, and we all have our particular perspectives. But nobody is greater than another. And we lose sight of this in the middle of relationships, especially when there is a discussion that is difficult or uncomfortable. Let's say I'm not doing the dishes, and and my wife has done the dishes all week long, and she starts to get a little frustrated that I'm not participating in the dishes. Now, I bring up this standpoint because we don't have a problem with dishes in our house. So I do the dishes, she does the dishes. Anyway, the point is this is just an example. But she might have to come to me with something that's very uncomfortable, and automatically she's going to feel like, she's carrying her part. She's doing the greater thing. She's being the bigger person. And we're not. And so right out of the gate, before we even approach somebody about needing their help and wanting their help with the dishes, we already start from a standpoint of superiority rather than a standpoint of, hey, what's going on with you? Normally you help with the dishes and you haven't been. Are you having a okay week? We don't come to them from the standpoint of equality. We come to them from the standpoint of superiority. I'm the only one cleaning the house. I'm the only one doing this. I'm the only one. Look at me, 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 me. And we don't notice that it's a place of arrogance because what we feel is that we feel we're a victim. And so we're having the feeling and the experience of being a victim of something that is not taking place, that is making our lives uncomfortable in our home. But the only way that we can actually address it on our own, given our human limited intellect and human limited emotional maturity, is to approach somebody as a superior, immediately putting them in a position of having to defend themselves because they may have a very legitimate emotional, intellectual, or spiritual issue going on that has just prevented them from even considering the dishes. Not that they ever meant to harm you or make you responsible for it, but that they had something bigger going on that made it difficult for them to even remember the responsibilities that they normally deal with. So that's why we try to seek peace, so that we are reminded in any given situation, especially when we have something difficult to bring before somebody, that first and foremost, we need to come from the standpoint of making peace and restoring the relationship, because it's not actually about the dishes. It's about the relationship. And it's about how we relate to others and how they relate to us, and the health of any given relationship, that whether it's between us and a boss, whether it's between us and a brother or sister, our parents, or our friends, or our mates, or even just our neighbors. But the good policy, the best policy always, is to consider how best can I make peace here. And when we do that, we automatically put ourselves into a position where we are now in the realm of God and God's kingdom. And so therefore, we have opened the channel in us for the world of the Spirit to teach us how to make peace, how to approach things. We have already acknowledged at this point that I don't particularly know the best way to make peace here. How can I best make peace? So I'm asking it in my own self. How can I best make peace? Well, who's answering that? Who's answering that is, some would say a higher self. Some would say, your guardian angels, whatever the case may be. For somebody like myself, I take these things directly to God the Father, because Jesus Christ opened the channel to where he is the messenger for us, and we can speak directly to the greatest power in all of existence, that which all existence came from, which is, just a general basic idea or definition of God the Father. It's just the source of everything. So going to the source of everything would have all the answers, particularly in detail, of how I could best make peace with another human being where I don't know what they're actually going through. I don't know why they're struggling with what they're struggling with. I don't know why their behavior has changed. I don't know if there's an issue going on, or if they've just been busy, or if it's something major or not. All I can do is assume based on patterns. I can only assume that something has changed for the worse or for the better. I can only assume based on the limited information I have. And even if you're with somebody 20, 30 years, we still have very limited information about that human being and what they're going through at any given moment. We may be the closest person on earth to them, and we still know very little about them and how they're processing something, because even on any given day, they may have new input into their life that touched a wound that they didn't even know still existed, never maybe even knew was there in the first place. And they may be dealing with something brand new that they don't even know how to realize in themselves yet. And so they're just not doing the dishes this week. And, if we come at them with, I'm doing all the dishes and you're not, we're overlooking an opportunity to actually build a relationship with somebody who may need to have a conversation with us about, something's going on with me and I don't know what it is. Or another thing, it could be completely benign and have nothing to do with anything bad. The point is in order to approach the person, or in order to approach the situation, the best way is to first seek, how can I make peace here? Now, that doesn't mean the other person's going to want to make peace. There are people who want to make war, and there are people who, as soon as a wound is touched in them, whether real or imagined, meaning whether we actually did something and we touched a wound, or they had a thought based on an assumption they made about us that touched one of their wounds, it puts them in a position where they want to make war because they feel so much pain and so much anguish, and they need to spew that out of themselves somewhere onto us. We're the ones there. And out of nowhere, an argument ensues. And even if we're trying to make peace. So it oftentimes requires a great deal of cooperation in a relationship on both parts. But in a scenario where we ourselves are taking the responsibility of trying to make peace, we can continually ask ourselves, what is the best way to make peace here? And it's a little too late once we get hooked into their pain, and then it touches our pain, and now we're spewing back. We've already stepped down the wrong road. So most of us don't then desire to make peace. We desire to keep the record straight, to get the record straight. And, once again, that was a principle. It's not that we can't start making peace at any given moment, even in the middle of a huge argument about something. But what I'm saying is we get hooked into the wounding. We get hooked into the traumas. We get hooked into, suddenly they're insulting us, and they're insulting our integrity, and they're insulting our will, and they're insulting our desire, and they're even insulting our behavior that doesn't exist because they just think it, because they're responding to a wound that was created before we even knew them. And the picture that we're making in dealing with this looks like something of the picture from their past. And we have no idea exactly what any of that is, and we don't really sometimes have an idea of why we're responding so negatively to it, and it's because of our own wounds. So we can, at any given moment, stop, pause, and ask God, how can I best make peace right now? But a lot of us struggle with that, and like I say, we get stuck and we get hooked. Because we want to keep the record straight. And so as soon as they start saying things to us that are not true, we want to pull out the truth and say, well, that is not true of me, and you're just saying this to, upset me, or what is wrong with you that you're lying to me about me, or, suddenly I'm so wounded that this person doesn't know me. Or is denying the person that they know in me, or acting like it didn't exist, or all this stuff, and it's just because they're wounded. And it seems like that's the right thing to do because we're telling the truth. We're responding with, no, here is the truth. That is not me, and I don't know why, you're saying these things, and this is what is actually me, and this is what's actually going on. And we think by keeping the record straight that we're bringing about justice and equality, when the reality is that desire in us to keep the record straight comes from wrath, because it is actually our need to be right and to tell the other person how they're wrong. And this is something that I myself just discovered in myself this last week, because I've always been a person who wants to keep the record straight and thought it was a respectful thing in which I was doing with other people. As soon as they would say something about me that was incorrect, I would correct them about myself. And it didn't matter if I did so in a friendly and kind and wonderful way that was not causing any additional problems, or it did, like I said, didn't matter if it came out vengefully, that argument back of how, it still came from the part of me that is wrath. It is the need to be right and to make another wrong. It is a need to tell myself I am the righteous one and they are not. What it does is it separates me from them as different. And suddenly, all the principles by which I try to live get thrown out the door because now I'm having a flesh human to flesh human argument. And the reality is we then try to control our behavior in a society that demands we have control over behavior, but we're dealing with instincts, and instincts don't care about our behavior. And it's ridiculous because we don't really have the power to overcome the instinct. We can control our behavior and do things where, we don't end up in jail or we don't end up, although a great many of us have over our lifetime in the middle of arguments, especially domestic ones with our mates. And then we sit in there and we wonder what on earth happened. All I wanted to do was have a barbecue for everybody and make everyone food, and it turned into I'm sitting in jail. The reason is because, once again, I was dealing on my self-reliance, and I was dealing with my own idea of right and wrong, which I hitherto, previously, have already admitted to has been ineffective. So the most difficult areas of our life is in confrontation, to remember and be humble and to continue to practice these principles of these 10 pillars and of Jesus Christ. I mean, the pillars themselves are just kind of an amalgamation of some important ideas that help us to live. But all of those principles by which we may ourselves hold very deeply and cherish and have devoted our life to suddenly become something that just gets thrown out the door because of our pain, and gets thrown out the door because of the pain of the other person. One person can make peace even when the other person's making war. One person does not have to engage in the war and can maintain a balance to themselves, to their behavior, to their motives, and to their thoughts. And the way to do that is by seeking to make peace and trying to remember this right from the get-go when there is contention of any kind. To try and remember that we want to pursue healing above all things in ourselves rather than to correct somebody who's wrong about us. That we seek to reconcile with others through the grace of forgiveness rather than point out their faults. And to remember that we ourselves have been forgiven. We ourselves were blind, and we ourselves are even more blind than the person who's incorrect about us if we feel we need to correct them, because we suddenly take the position of superiority. And as soon as we believe we're superior to another human being, we have actually damaged them, and the damage we're doing is worse than the damage they're doing to us. And all abuse comes from a position of one human being who believes they have authority over another human being. And so even the principle and the need that we feel it as a need, the need to keep the record straight is a principle of abuse, because it sets us, once again, and I'm repeating myself here, it sets us in a position of superiority, and every position of abuse in life is because of someone who believes they are superior. And it doesn't matter what type of abuse it is. The person in that instance is acting from a position of superiority. Now, some people will say, no, I've been a victim of abuse myself, and I have no self-esteem, and I have no this, and I have no that, and so when somebody attacks me or whatever, I immediately have to show them and prove to them that they can't do that to me. they are wrong, they are this, we need to fight back. That's what psychologists call an inferiority complex, an egomaniac with an inferiority complex. So what we have to deal with in ourselves, if that's how we feel, is the fact that we actually feel inferior. And and here's another reality to all this: only a position of a lack of power seeks power over another. Only a position of a lack of strength seeks to prove their strength over another. Only a position of lack of intellect tries to assume a position of greater intellect. That which has greater intellect has greater intellect, and it doesn't need to let anyone know or tell anyone no or share it with anyone at all. It has no need to wield a greater intellect over a person who doesn't have it. Same with somebody who actually has power. They don't feel the need to exert that power over another person. Someone who actually has power wants you to have power also. They will try to give you power. They will share power with you. They will say, one of the greatest powers on earth is love. And they will say, I love you and I want you to feel my love. I want you to feel loved. I want you to feel accepted and wonderful and feel the power of actual love, that you have a friend in me and I'm going to stand with you no matter what, buddy, or, our wives or our husbands. When we actually have power, we want to give it. When we actually have superiority, we want to lift others up. And I don't mean that, once again, that any of us are superior to another human being, because all people are of equal value to God. But you may have the greater information or the greater experience in something. We take our cars to a mechanic for a reason. They have a greater knowledge, understanding, and personal experience with working on cars than we do. So they are the superior in that scenario. And there are times you are going to be the superior in a scenario, and there are times others are going to be a superior in the scenario. But if you feel inferior in any areas of your life, you're going to block off the fact that anybody is superior to you, because that's a wound that hurts when it's touched, the idea that somebody's superior. And so you're just going to walk around your whole life thinking you know more than a car mechanic, even though you're not a car mechanic. And we see this all over the place. We see people talking about politics and how politicians are horrible people, and from one side or the other, and they don't know anything about politics at all themselves. We see this with religions and churches, and we see people talking about, oh, that person's this, or we see it at work, and people saying this person just always is that way, and this person's always that way, and yet they've never actually had a life like that other person whatsoever. This all comes from a place of inferiority. It means we lack power, and we're envious, and we're covetous, and we want to take power, and we want to gain power over something, and we need to harm another and lower another and debase another and tell them where they're wrong and talk about how everyone else is wrong on earth and we're the only ones who are right, because we're not. We're not right, because we don't have the answers. And we have to hide the fact because we're too afraid to admit to ourselves that we're scared, that we don't actually know what's going on, and we don't actually know what is right and what is wrong. So we need other people to show us respect, and we need other people to acknowledge our greatness, and we need other people to do all this, because we become dependent on them. We get so offended when somebody says, well, you're a jerk. I need you to say I'm not a jerk. Why do I need another person to say I'm not a jerk? Unless their word about me is greater than my word about me. If I know I did my very best in a situation and no part of me wanted to bring harm, I had no intention of harm. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't touch somebody's wound and cause them to have pain. But what it means is I'm not a jerk. Because, a jerk would be a person who wants to razz you up and wants to get you riled up and wants to get you freaked out, you know. So if the other person says, well, you're just a jerk, and I myself know I have taken no actions by my choice or even out of reaction to do so, their word doesn't hurt me. It only hurts me if I actually believe I am inferior. If I don't have a sense of self. And that sense of self comes from having a relationship with God, having a relationship with the Holy Spirit, having a relationship that we connect to on that level. Do we start to be able to make decisions on how we want to practice our lives? And because really the only divide, what God says is I put before you life and death, the only divide is our intention. Do I intend to do well? Do I wish to do well? Do I intend to try and love? Do I wish to try and love? We're going to fail. Like I said, no human being is actually the superior one in any kind of given relationship. There may be authority, like with a boss or a parent, but nobody is superior in the eyes of God. We are all God's kids, and He loves all of us. And He waits on all of us to want to have a relationship with Him, because that is the powerful choice you have the authority to make all on your own. And nobody can tell you you need to make it. Only you can decide whether you want to make it or not. It needs to be not coerced, not shamed. Oh, you're a shameful person because you don't go to church and you don't follow God, you don't do this. And that will never get you to, that actually will direct you further away from ever having the power to make the choice of what you want. It's a very reason why the sanctuary exists, is that we want to reopen those doors to all of us, myself included, who were so wounded and so hurt that we had the doors closed on us. And in our rebellion, we continued to keep the doors closed. I discovered how ridiculous it was. It's like going to see a band perform a cover song of another group, and they do it so horribly that I blame the original group and I blame the songwriters. When we see pastors, we see priests, and we see people who've been abusive and harmful and use the name of God in order to harm people. I've spent my whole life blaming God for that. Because, once again, I myself didn't have any answers. And I needed to stop blaming God and to reconcile my relationship with God through seeking peace and say, okay, these people don't know God either. And I was able to see it from that standpoint because I no longer needed them to acknowledge me. I didn't need them to tell me whether I qualified for God or not anymore. I was not inferior to them. They were just another human being doing the job that they're doing, sadly, very badly, because they were doing so from a standpoint of arrogance and superiority. Instead of recognizing their behavior, I blamed God for that. Today I understand. There are going to be people on this earth who come from a place of such damage in their life that they need to seek superiority in order to just balance out how inferior they actually are. Because, once again, somebody with power doesn't need to exert that power over you. They wish to give it. Somebody with authority doesn't desire to exercise that authority over you. They desire to use the tools they've been given and the laws, like let's say for a police officer in a healthy emotional position will wish to use what they have been given and the authority they have been given to help you, to save you from a car wreck, to get in between two people arguing and bring peace to a situation. to be a peace officer rather than somebody who desires to arrest you and throw you in jail. There are good people with good intentions everywhere on earth, in every society, in every religion, and in every office. And there are people who intend to steal and take and get whatever they wish through the use of arrogant superiority. And I have to remember that when those wounds in me get touched between myself and another human being, that need to set the record straight comes from that arrogant place of superiority, which is wrath. And that wrath comes from a place of deep insecurity within myself. And I will say it very clearly. Anyone who wishes to exercise authority over you is deeply insecure with themselves. And so we pray for them instead that they admit that to themselves and seek God. Because if they were presented with the truth, they would not wish to do the things that they're doing against other human beings. We know this because we have been around in history long enough. And we have had enough stories, and we have had enough study, and we've had enough psychology, and we've had enough psychiatry, and we've had enough medicines, and we've had enough journeys, and we've had enough religions, and we've had enough to learn the difference between life and death, and those that seek life and those that seek death. And it's time instead for us to stop punishing everybody who was on the path of death, and instead, once again, do like Jesus Christ and try and offer them the path of life. Because a person on the path of death has absolutely no choices. They have lost the ability to choose between life and death because they can't even see what they have chosen. That's what it means to be in darkness. You're still in the room. You're still in God's house, but all the lights are off and you can't see where you are. You have no idea where you are. You think you're somewhere else. You believe you're somewhere else, and you experience what it feels like to be somewhere else, to be disconnected from God, to be without power. And so you have to exert power over others in order to compensate, and we just end up hurting people. But Christ is the light that brings light to the dark, and once we see the light, we see where we are, and there isn't any of us that wants to choose pain if we know the difference. We think we do. There are people who even, they enjoy pain more than pleasure. I won't get into that right now because that's another big topic. But the point is it is up to us to make the decision to seek peace, regardless of the other person, because the other person may just be wounded and hurt, or they don't know what's going on. And it only takes one of us to take responsibility for that and say, I wish to make peace. God, what can I do to make peace here? To restore, to let somebody know, you know what, you're right, I was wrong. I raised my voice, I yelled, I called you a name, I did this. You're right, I did do those things. It was wrong of me to do those things. It is not how I actually feel about you. It is not who you actually are to me. It was said in argument. And I will continue to bring this before God so that it either happens less and less or doesn't happen ever again. We take responsibility for ourselves and we make peace. And how we make peace is by not pointing out the wrongs of the other person, but by accepting the responsibility of our own behavior and acknowledging where that behavior was harmful to another human being. Maybe we stole money from somebody and we need to give it back. Maybe we lied to somebody and we need to make it right about money or whatever. We make peace by restoring those relationships with integrity and with honor. Once again, principles of God that we cannot do on our own. So we have to have that relationship with God, that connection to God, and the trust to follow God, even when we're scared, that these principles that He gave to us will always lead us to a greater and better place, and that place of everlasting life, of freedom from all, every tear will be wiped away. In the kingdom of God, there are no tears. Right now, there still are tears in heaven. There are those who have passed on. It says so. Can't remember what book, actually. I think it's Revelation. About the souls under the throne, saying, how much longer, God, do the people of earth have to suffer? There's something to that, paraphrasing. But when the time comes of the fullness, there will be no more tears at all, because all of us will be once again restored to a place of the absolute truth. And when we're in the absolute truth, and when we know the truth fully, we're not angry, we're not upset, we're not wounded, we're not defective, we're not wrong, and others are right. We are the truth. And so, in making peace, I have to, at times, say the truth and let somebody know, you are right. I harmed you. I did not mean to harm you, but I did harm you because I can see the pain coming out of you by what I said. If I had no intention of harming them, I don't have to own up to purposely harming them. That would be a lie. But I can start to see that even without intention, I caused another human being to be wounded or to feel their wounds again. Now, they are responsible for that themselves, but do I love them or not? And if I love a person, I don't want to be someone that touches their wounds, even the ones I don't know about. And so when I do, even by mistake, the whole point is to get to a place where I seek to make peace. And I'll say, yes, I touched that wound. I did not mean to touch that wound, but I did touch the wound. What can I do to help restore this? And maybe what that wound made them feel was unsafe. So I need to create safety again. Maybe that wound made them feel unloved or unattractive. And I can remind them, here's what I can do. I can let you know how attractive you are, how, like if it's a friend, to say, every time I'm with you, buddy, man, you just make me laugh, and we hang out and we do stuff, and you have such great ideas. And, if it's with an intimate partner, of course, obviously we can go a little bit deeper and restore the relationship by restoring what is missing. Because our goal here is to seek peace and to seek restoration, not to seek blame, not to fix the other person, not even to fix ourselves, because the principle of peace and the principle of forgiveness is what fixes us. All we have to do is practice the principle. So we try to quickly forgive them of what they have done, said in retaliation to us, or whatever the case may be. We ask God, I seek to forgive them. And then God gives us the knowledge of that their part isn't actually about us. It's about them and what hurts in them. And then, suddenly, when we feel that and we connect to that, now suddenly we want to make peace. What can I do to help? Because this is a person I actually love. This is a person I actually care about. And the pain of them touching my wounds also isn't about them. That's about me. And I'm responsible for my wounds. They aren't. And so it's not about, well, I'm the bigger person here, and I'm taking the role of loving them. And if I need acknowledgement for that, that's not love. That's a negotiation. If I actually love them, I'll just try to love them again. If I need them to recognize it, or if I need to tell myself, well, even though they were still half-cocked and being all mean to me, I at least, was able to make peace and stop and settle down. And so, man, that's all from a place of insecurity, inferiority, and a need to overcompensate with hubris, pride, and superiority. And that's not love. Love doesn't ask the other person to do something. Love gives. Love understands. Love forgives. Love accepts. Love wishes blessings and prosperity on another human. I have some people in my life that are grave enemies because everything that comes out of their mouth is an attack every single time. And all I wish for them is that they have prosperity and God and peace in their life. Because if they did, they wouldn't be attacking anybody. They would no longer feel the need to, because they wouldn't be so insecure and inferior to themselves. They wouldn't believe they are. They would know the truth. And instead, they themselves would try to seek ways to make peace and restoration with others. So there's no real way, there's no right way, no wrong way that anybody can tell any other human being exactly how they need to go about this or who they need to go about this with. This is for ourselves. We make these lists ourselves of people in our lives that, we all know. We all know those in our world that we need to make peace with. And they could even be dead, They could be people who've passed on, but we can still go visit a graveyard and speak some things to them and make peace because you know what? They are there in spirit with God. And they are alive. They're very much alive. And they very much know if we have taken and made the effort to restore our relationship with them, even though they're not here on earth anymore. But the whole point of all of it is just to be in the position of willingness to forgive and willingness to make peace. That is our part in that. Because when we are willing, God will show us how to, and we will want to do what God shows us how to do. We don't need to have the answers first. We just need to be willing. And sometimes we're not willing. But see, that's the truth also. And it's okay to admit the truth to ourselves. I'm not willing to forgive this person. I'm not willing to have peace yet with them. I'm not even willing to try. And there's some people we shouldn't ever approach again. Like I said, people who've abused us in the past, or we have abused so bad that, if we run into them just out of nowhere, we might go, hey, you know what? I was a terrible person in your life. But we don't pursue them, right? Like, we've done enough damage. Let's leave them alone. But in the world that we have today, the people in our lives today, are we continuing that cycle of abuse? Are we continuing that cycle because of our own pain of who we've harmed and who harmed us? Or are we willing to at least be willing to seek peace and to seek forgiveness? And that's why this is a practice, because we will never master it. I got the gardeners outside doing the yard. And I could go on and on and on forever about this subject. There's so many things that I was not able to cover about this here. But, like I said, ultimately, it is simply about our willingness. And if we're not willing, then we ask God to help us be willing. And if we become willing, where we want to seek peace, and maybe you've always wanted to seek peace and it's just failed every time, well, trust God. Go to God and say, I've wanted to make peace and I failed. Do the other pillars. Surrender. Surrender that truth. Confess that truth. Take responsibility for it. And have faith that God will give you the answers if you seek God rather than your own opinions. Or your own, God's never going to lead you into further darkness. He will lead you into light, into an area where you yourself will agree with the light you see. And the person you become, the peaceful person you become, you yourself will agree with it because it is actually who you are. That's why the desire was always in your heart in the first place, to be a person of peace and to be a person who had a joyful life and a caring life amongst others. And if you've been somebody who has struggled a great deal with constantly confronting others, constantly at odds with others, even in there, All you have to do is start with a desire to seek peace. You don't have to kowtow to anybody and, oh, I'm just a terrible person. Just ask God to help you seek peace and to help you forgive so that you stop always being in the middle of an argument with someone. We are going to fail at times, and we're going to stumble, and we're going to touch people's wounds, and they're going to touch our wounds, and we're going to fly off the handle every once in a while. But all that reminds us is that this principle is something that we need to continue to practice and continue to learn from. Like I said, just this last week, I learned that part of me that just wants to speak the truth actually comes from wrath. And so instead, I need to stop and realize that none of it is actually about me. It's about my relationship. Am I loving the other person still? Am I accepting the other person even when they're angry? Am I willing to love them and help them and be there for them even when they're angry with me? Am I willing to hear them and listen and to seek what I can do to make peace? And if I do that, I will end up asking God how to do that. And God will give me the answers every time. It may take a few days, may take a month, may take a year, but the answers will always come if we ask God for them, because He wants to teach us about the ways of life that is life eternal and everlasting and joyful and peaceful. And I think that's about all I need to say here. Thank you for allowing me to bring this to you. Our next pillar is awareness, and then communion, and then service. So we have 3 more left to talk about, and this was number 7. And I knew it would be one of the bigger ones because restoration and forgiveness is a massive topic. But in general, I just wanted to hit on it and share some of my own personal experience with the things that I've learned as an example that hopefully you can reflect on in your life and in areas that any of these things might affect you. And I know if you seek God and you follow God and you say, hey, I'm going to start taking this stuff to God, you cannot fail. You're going to be fine. And nobody needs to tell you what to do or how to do it, because God Himself will reveal these things to you and help you restore your life and help you to make peace and help you to have peace and experience peace in your relationship to yourself, to Him, and to your neighbors. I love you. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.